What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So since we did a video for the champions that are definitely going to be getting some buffs in the future, it only makes sense that we should also take a look at some champions that are definitely going to be nerfed in the future, and why those champions in particular might be problematic at the moment. Fortunately, Riot have been just as open about the overpowered champions, or at least the champions that they see as overpowered, in the game right now as much as the underpowered ones. And although they haven't been nerfed just yet because Riot wants to see how patch 624 affects them, all the champions we're talking about are definitely going to be tuned in one of the upcoming next patches, either 7.1, 7.2, maybe even as far as 7.3 or a bit later, but hopefully the knowledge of this video will maybe get you ahead of the curve so that you can prepare for some upcoming changes in the future. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, feel free to hit that dislike button too. And let's get started. So first up on our list of nerf candidates is Rek'Sai, and Riot have been actually pretty careful with how they approach changes to Rek'Sai in particular. The issues with her run deeper than, just being a case of her kit being a little bit too strong, or her having, too good of a stat line, or just numbers in general. The issues Riot want to solve with her have a lot more to do with her identity and balanceability in a sense. So it's going to be a pretty long process actually with Rek'Sai, and the nerfs for her aren't coming probably anytime soon, and if they do, they're just going to be sort of like a small band-aid minor sort of change. This is an issue Riot keep running into with some of the more modern champions. They're designed in such a way that their raw mechanics is really what makes them overpowered at the end of the day, so they can't easily adjust them just by lowering their numbers or shaving off some power in certain scenarios. For Rek'Sai, she's got a lot going for her that Riot can't nerf without really making her completely useless. She's got amazing jungle clear, she's got solid sustain, mobility ganks, and even some poke and true damage actually. And maybe one of the biggest mistakes that Riot have been making with these newer champions is that a lot of these kits are kind of just honestly a little bit too overloaded, to the point where there just aren't enough defined weaknesses to make an older champion worth playing over one of the newer ones that are competing for the same spot. And this is definitely the case with Rek'Sai. So if they can't just tweak her numbers or stats, it's pretty likely that Rek'Sai will be due for a potential mini rework in the future actually that might make her a little bit less effective in general, or at least a mini rework that will make her easier to balance in the future. Riot Axes mentioned the scope of this would be around kind of what they did with Alistar, but it's probably going to take longer than just patch 7.1 to finish up, so it's going to come a few patches down the road. Next up we have Shyvana herself, which is a champion that recently received one of these new mini reworks from Riot and has been in a pretty dominant position because of it actually. Shyvana's mini rework changed a lot of her fundamentals to put her in a better spot and gave her a more solid identity as sort of like a half-dragon character, but it's honestly done wonders for her power overall. Right now it's definitely looking like patch 623 did give her quite a bit of a boost. That being said though, the mini rework was definitely a success. It's actually made balancing Shyvana a more realistic prospect because now she has a lot more defined strengths and weaknesses. Take her early clear power for example. It's really intended to be a big strength of Shyvana, so that's still going to be the case after she receives her nerfs. But Riot can safely reduce the power of it a little bit without stopping her from being good at all at clearing the jungle in the early game anymore. It looks like Riot are aiming to get Shyvana addressed in patch 7.1 actually, since there is still a decent amount of time until the patch releases, so they can take a closer look at how she's performing and decide exactly where she needs to lose some power in her kit. And the third champion that will be getting nerfed in the future is actually Poppy, although it's a little bit difficult to say exactly what those changes are going to be. So Riot Meddler offered a few notes about what Riot were currently thinking when it comes to the state of Poppy, and it seems like the main issue that they have with her is actually just all about resilience. Right now it's just way too difficult to counter or even kill a Poppy. Her sticking power is really just insane, which makes her one of the hardest champions to peel off of your carries or to focus down with your DPS. The current plan is kind of just try to, shorten her passive shield, which gives her up to that 20% of her maximum HP for 5 seconds actually at the moment. And Riot likes the fact that she's rewarded for picking up her shield, so the strength of it probably isn't going to change, but it's likely that the duration of it is going to be reduced to around 3 seconds, so that players have a little bit of a time to play around with it without giving Poppy too much time to do whatever she wants. Patch 624 will probably have a bit of an effect on her though, thanks to the nerfs to the Courage of the Colossus Mastery. Riot believes that she's, strong enough that she'll still need changes to her kit regardless though, but they aren't rushing changes in case the mastery nerfs have more of an impact than initially expected. Now, one champion that was actually due for some nerfs in patch 624 that actually got pulled was Syndra. So she had some nerfs planned as changes for patch 624 that were actually removed at the last minute because right before the patch was about to hit, her win rate, ban rate, and pick rate had all dropped actually pretty massively. And Riot can't, they don't want to use those particular stats to figure out how to balance champions, but they do definitely work as like a good indicator of, how urgent a problem actually is. For example, a champion with a win rate that's above 55, 56% is probably a champion that needs like a fast response or like, they need to address that immediately. But one that's, performing at sort of like an average rate, maybe 51, 52%, is a champion that's going to need a little bit more of an observation to figure out what the ideal nerf to them is in order to rebalance them effectively so that you can nerf them without destroying the entire kit. So the planned nerfs to Syndra were going to be to her base damage, so she'd be more dependent on scaling up over the course of the game and be less lethal at level 6. Riot originally decided to add the nerfs to patch 7.1 instead, but since she's dropped in popularity so much in such a short time, Riot they've got a lot more time to figure out better changes that will potentially address her underlying issues, rather than just slapping a big numbers nerf on her to stop her from being oppressive while they come up with an ideal solution, which probably means we'll see some sort of like minor, numbers nerf to Syndra in patch 7.1 or 7.2, but it's potentially more likely to be a little bit more complex. So Riot Meddler offered a little bit more context on this with some of the ideas for her changes, such as potentially increasing her ultimate cooldown a bit to increase the window where you can play against her, or potentially removing her new W passive since it allows her to get 7 spheres a little bit too consistently, which originally was a nice skill reward for experienced Syndra players, but has turned out to be a little bit too powerful. Of course, if they remove that though, they would need to make sure that it's replaced with something that's still satisfying to use, still impactful and stuff. So Riot are kind of messing around with some ideas. They're considering some potential true damage or something like that, since true damage isn't going to make her that much more powerful against squishy targets, but could potentially help her DPS against tanks. And the next champion that's receiving a nerf is going to be Ryze actually, and his planned nerfs are already on the PB at the time of making this video, and a lot of Rioters have commented on it as well. And what's kind of interesting though is that these changes are really just targeted at nerfing competitive Ryze specifically, or rather how Ryze works in pro play by itself, rather than, general ranked solo queue casual play, all that stuff. The nerfs on the PB currently are lowering his damage at all stages of the game on his Q and reducing the bonus movement speed over the course of the game as well. Whether they're targeted at competitive play or not though, they're definitely still going to have an effect on the ranked meta and the players that do enjoy playing Ryze. It will maybe, or at least it's supposed to be, or supposed to have a little bit less of an impact on normal play than it might on the pro scene. The average Ryze player isn't necessarily all that great judging by his win rate, definitely not strong enough to merit nerfs based on solo queue alone, but the problem really is when he's played to his maximum potential on a really coordinated team, he's just too powerful. The part of Ryze's kit that's best used by experienced players in this case is going to be the movement speed, so that's why Riot have decided to target that specifically, because it would affect him at the top end without making him, completely unplayable for the average player, since the average player, let's be real here, at least according to Riot statistics, won't necessarily use that movement speed buff as effectively or as efficiently. Now these are kind of just like test nerfs though, so these exact changes maybe aren't set in stone, at least as far as what he's getting nerfed, but Riot definitely want to dial back his power somewhat because he's a bit too dominant in the hands of professional players, so some form of nerf for Ryze in patch 7.1 is pretty much confirmed at this point. And last up, we have Hecarim, and I gotta be honest with this one, Hecarim's nerfs are not actually guaranteed, which is why I wanted to put him at the end of the video. Hecarim's definitely in a pretty good position, although he's not broken or ridiculously overpowered. He's become more of like a common pick for junglers thanks to being relatively safe, while still offering a lot of carry potential, but a lot of his power came down to the fact that he was just too strong when he used the Courage of the Colossus, which was a mastery that has already been hit with a nerf actually. So now that those nerfs have gone through, Riot are kind of just like playing the observation game. You know, they're just keeping an eye on Hecarim's performance overall. Either the Colossus nerfs will put him into a more balanced state, or they'll maybe need to address his kit to make him a little bit more fair to play against. Hecarim actually gets banned out a decent amount at the moment, so because of that, Riot might actually accelerate the potential nerfs that could be coming to Hecarim. But I would expect to see maybe some like really small or like minor tweaks to numbers or base damages or something like that. Something really minor, a really small nerf to Hecarim on either patch 7.1 or what's more likely is patch 7.2. Either way though, that just about wraps up the list of champions that have been confirmed as lined up for nerfs in the upcoming patches. You know, it's definitely good to know what to expect, since it does give you a lot more time to prepare and maybe even think about what champions might rise in popularity and replace the ones that receive heavy nerfs, or adjust your champion pool accordingly. So definitely let us know in the comments section below what champion you think deserves to get some nerfs in the future that maybe doesn't have any confirmed yet. Either way though, looks like that's going to be it from me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.